Welcome back, everyone. Tonight, we'll dive into a story about love, mistakes, and second chances. It's a tale of a young woman who never imagined that one night would change the rest of her life forever. Before we begin, don't forget to comment below the city you're watching from and give this story a rating at the end. We hope this story keeps you company, warms your heart, and maybe even helps you fall asleep peacefully. Now, let's begin.
How the story begins. Deborah.
Miller tightened the strap of her worn-out purse as she walked down the cracked sidewalk of her neighborhood. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting dim halos of yellow light. It had been 3 years since her parents passed away, and every day since. She had carried the weight of survival on her shoulders. Her younger sister, Diana, waited for her. At home in their small rented duplex, they had patched it together with savings, secondhand furniture, and long nights of shared meals that sometimes were nothing more than instant noodles and tap water. Diana was still in college, juggling part-time jobs, while Deborah had thrown herself completely into work to keep their lives afloat. She was 24 years old and had almost forgotten what it felt like to smile without worry. The weight of responsibility. Deborah worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized company in town. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and Diana's tuition, but she never complained. She often told her sister, "As long as you finish your degree, things will get better. One of us has to break this cycle." Diana would squeeze her hand and whisper, "We'll break it together." Still, Deborah's nights were long and lonely. She had no time for dates, no space in her life for romance. Friends teased her about being too serious, but she knew the truth. She simply didn't have the luxury to dream. A night out one Friday evening. That one. Alice convinced her to take a break. "On, Deb," Alice said, grabbing her arm. "One night won't kill you. You need to breathe, maybe laugh a little. Who knows? You might even meet someone interesting." "I don't need someone," Deborah replied with a tired laugh. "I just need another paycheck." But Alice was relentless. By 9 o'clock, Deborah found herself in a downtown bar, a glass of wine in her hand. The music was soft, the crowd relaxed. For the first time in months, she felt the tightness in her chest ease. One drink became 2, then 3. Alice cheered her on, and Deborah, unfamiliar with alcohol's weight, felt her world tilt. She remembered laughter, blurry lights, and then him. The encounter. Dexter Hayes had just been appointed the new CEO of the very company Deborah worked for. Recognized him immediately that night. All she saw was a tall man with sharp features, a suit jacket slung carelessly over one arm, and eyes that carried both exhaustion and curiosity. He offered her a smile. "Rough week?" she laughed, though it came out slurred. "Rough life. A day." Talked to her at least, she thought they did. Her memory was hazy, full of fragments, his hand steadying her when she stumbled. His voice low in her ear, the way her heart pounded even as her head spun. And then the night blurred completely. The morning after Deborah awoke to sunlight stabbing through unfamiliar blinds, her head throbbed. Confusion hit first, then dread, as she realized she wasn't in her own bed. Panic clawed at her chest when she turned and saw Dexter, half asleep beside her. Her breath caught. Flashes of the night before rushed in wine. Laughter, a kiss she barely remembered. She slipped out of bed, trembling, gathering her clothes with shaking hands. Shame and fear tangled inside her. "What have I done?" Dexter stirred, opening his eyes. "Deborah," but she was already at the door, whispering only one word before she fled. "Sorry." Faster. Aftermath. Back at home, Deborah stood in the shower far longer than usual, the water running cold as tears mingled with it. Diana noticed her red eyes but didn't press. "Rough day at work?" she asked gently. Deborah forced a smile, something like that. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just something. It was everything. One night she regretted instantly. One mistake that she feared would haunt her for the rest of her life, and she had no idea that the consequences of that night were only just beginning. Saturday crept in soft and gray, the kind of morning that begged for staying under blankets. Deborah was already up, sitting at the tiny kitchen table with a chipped mug between her palms. The coffee had gone cold. she hadn't taken a sip. Diana shuffled out in an oversized sweatshirt, hair a sleepy halo. Wow. You're up before the sun and the rent. That's never good. She peered at Deborah's face. You okay? Deborah forced a nod. Just tired? From what? You never go out. Diana grinned, then noticed the silence that followed her joke. The grin faded. Deborah stared at the ring of coffee on the table and whispered, I made a mistake. Diana slid into the chair opposite her, voice gentle. Do you want to talk about it? No. The word came out too quickly, too hard. She softened it with a sigh. Not yet. Diana didn't push. She reached across the table and squeezed Deborah's fingers once, a quiet I'm here, then stood. Pancakes? Deborah nodded, grateful for the normalcy. The sizzle of batter hitting the pan filled the silence while the clock ticked on the wall and the apartment woke to a new day. By the time the pancakes were stacked high and drizzled with cheap syrup, Deborah's hands had stopped shaking, but her chest still felt hollow. She tried to eat. The first bite barely reached her tongue before a wave of nausea crashed over her. She dropped the fork, bolted for the sink, and gripped the edge until the room stopped spinning. Diana's eyes widened. You're sick. Sit. She guided Deborah to the couch and pressed a cool glass of water into her hands. You've been pushing too hard at work. Maybe, Deborah murmured. The word tasted like a lie. The nausea didn't pass. It grew. Teeth. By Monday, Deborah had memorized every trash bin on her route to the bus stop. Coffee smelled like metal. Perfume made her head throb. She told herself it was stress, lack of sleep, anything but the thing it might be. Then she missed her period. She bought the test on her lunch. Brake shoved it under a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs, as if cardboard and yolk could hide the weight of it. She walked home after work because the thought of sitting on a bus with this secret rattling in a plastic bag made her skin itch. At the apartment, Diana wasn't their late class, overtime shift, one more thing they couldn't afford to lose. Deborah locked the bathroom door, unwrapped the box, read the instructions twice, then a third time, as if new words might appear to save her. She took the test, set the stick on the sink, waited her hands wouldn't stop shaking. When the second line bloomed, pink and undeniable, she pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from making a sound. She slid down the wall to the cold tile and stayed there a long time. Listening to the tiny bathroom fan hum like a faraway train, pregnant the word arrived with a flood of images, the night in fragments. A man's voice she could barely remember. Her own laughter turned brittle as glass. Panic roared up so fast she couldn't breathe. Then, like a lighthouse through fog, another image cut through the idea of a heartbeat. Small and new, a life that had nothing to do with regret. She didn't know how long she sat there. When the door finally opened and Diana called her name, Deborah splashed water on her face and stepped out, a test hidden behind her back like contraband. Diana took one look and closed the distance, eyes wide and fierce. Tell me. Deborah held out the test. Diana glanced at it once and then at Deborah. She didn't ask who. She didn't lecture. She just pulled Deborah into a hug that broke whatever dam Deborah had tried to build inside herself. Deborah sobbed. Into her sister's shoulder, fear, shame, relief, all tangled. When the tears quieted, Diana brushed hair from Deborah's cheek. Okay, we breathe. We make a plan. We've done harder things. Different, Deborah whispered. It is, Diana agreed. Different doesn't mean impossible. I don't know if I can do this. Then we'll do it together. They made an appointment at the community clinic under Diana's name. A small act of privacy in a world that liked to make stories out of women's lives. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and baby powder. Posters lined the wall, resources, support lines. The phrase "you have options" written in bold, soft letters. A nurse with kind eyes took Deborah's vitals and led her to a small exam room, confirmed the pregnancy, and talked through next steps. How are you feeling? Deborah thought of 100 answers and chose the only honest one. Scared. That's normal, the nurse said gently. You're not alone. The phrase landed in Deborah's chest like a warm stone. For months, She had carried every bill, every fear, every late-night calculation alone. The idea that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to it made her throat ache. The test confirmed what she already knew. The nurse scheduled a follow-up, handed Deborah a stack of pamphlets, and wrote a number on the top sheet. Counseling, if you want it. No pressure. Outside, the late winter air pinched their cheeks pink. Diana tucked the pamphlets into her tote. We need to budget, she said, practical as ever, and talk to HR about maternity leave, and maybe look for a second-hand crib. Alice's cousin was giving one away last month. Deborah's lips quirked. You're already 10 steps ahead. Someone has to be. Diana bumped her shoulder, then sobered. Deb, do you want to tell him? The question hung between them like fog. Deborah saw Dexter's face in flashes, the clean lines of his jaw, the tired weight in his eyes, the way his voice had wrapped around her name that morning. She ran. Shame flushed her skin. I don't even know him, she said, voice thin. I don't know what he'd do with this. With me. You know enough to know he has a name, Diana said gently. And power. That's not a small thing. Deborah swallowed. The words she couldn't say kept marching through her head. Intoxicated, taken advantage of, I didn't consent to this life being formed from a night I barely remember. But tangled up in those truths was another. An ultrasound appointment circled in black pen. A tiny future. I can't think about him right now, she said. I have to think about us. Then we do that. Diana nodded. One breath. One bill. One appointment at a time. Weeks spilled forward. Morning sickness eased, then surged again, like a tide. Deborah measured days in cups of peppermint tea and saltine crackers. In Excel spreadsheets, she finished between bathroom trips. In quiet moments on the bus where she pressed a palm to her belly and whispered, Hi, stay. Alice found out 2 weeks later when she caught Deborah puking behind a storage shelf at work. She didn't gasp. She swore softly, handed Deborah a clean napkin, and said, Okay, we are not doing this alone, you hear me? I'll cover your desk when you need to disappear. I'll bring you ginger candies. And I'll fight anyone who looks at you wrong. Deborah laughed wetly. Please don't fight anyone. No promises, Alice said, eyes fierce. But I'll start with a glare. There. Small world reorganized around a new center of gravity. Diana picked up extra shifts. Alice ferried soups and prenatal vitamins. Deborah kept her head down at work, determined to protect both her paycheck and her privacy. She avoided the executive floor, where rumors said the new CEO had finally arrived in full force early meetings. Late nights, a reshuffling that made managers twitchy. She told herself it didn't matter. He didn't matter. Survival did still. Some nights she woke from dreams she couldn't fully remember, suit jacket over her shoulder. A voice like late-night radio, the ache of wanting to turn time back, and the ache of wanting not to. On those nights she padded to the kitchen and drank. Water in the dark until the quiet felt safer. At her next clinic appointment, the nurse offered an early ultrasound. The room dimmed, the machine hummed, and then there it was on the screen. A smudge of light flickering, brave and insistent. Heartbeat. Deborah's own heart answered, sharp and tender. The nurse printed a grainy black and white photo and tucked it into Deborah's file, then into Deborah's hand. Congratulations, she said, soft and real. On the bus home, Deborah held the little rectangle like a passport. She wanted to show Diana, to show Alice, to show the whole tired city that something new was beginning in the most ordinary of apartments. She didn't think about Dexter until the bus rolled past a glass tower downtown, and a familiar logo caught the light. Her breath hitched. Her reflection in the window looked back at her with a question she wasn't ready to answer. Not yet, she told herself. First rent, first vitamins, first breathing. But fate doesn't keep calendars, and secrets don't stay secret forever. Deborah learned both truths the morning she finally stepped off the elevator on the executive floor. Summoned by a terse email for an all-staff briefing with the new CEO, she smoothed her blouse, pressed the ultrasound photo flat in her purse like a talisman, and followed the crowd into the conference room. When the door at the front opened and Dexter Hayes walked in, the room adjusted around him, the way rooms do for men who rarely hear the word no. He scanned the faces, a polite smile clicking into place. Then his gaze landed on Deborah. Something flickered recognition, shock, a memory unspooling, and for a heartbeat the whole world went silent. Deborah's hand found her stomach. Second heartbeat she carried answered, steady and small. The secret was no longer just hers. The conference room emptied slowly, a tide of employees filing out with chatter about quarterly goals and new initiatives. Deborah stayed seated, pretending to shuffle notes she hadn't taken. Her palms were damp against the folder she clutched. At the front of the room, Dexter was shaking hands with senior managers, his smile polite, practiced. But Deborah felt his gaze flick to her more than once, like a searchlight sweeping over a dark harbor. When the room finally thinned, she rose, head down, and slipped toward the door. "Miss Miller." The voice stopped her cold, smooth, resonant, but carrying an edge that cut. She turned. Dexter stood a few feet away, no longer the relaxed stranger from that blurred night, but the full weight of a CEO suit, impeccable presence, heavy. His eyes locked on hers with a certainty that made her want to bolt. "Yes, sir?" Her voice came out thin, formal. He dismissed the assistant hovering at his side with a nod. When the door clicked shut, the room was suddenly too quiet. "You work here?" It wasn't a question. Deborah gripped the folder tighter. "Yes. Administrative. Support." Something unreadable passed over his face, surprise, calculation, maybe even guilt. "I didn't know." Her chest tightened. "Of course you didn't. You didn't ask. You didn't care." She straightened her spine. "Ash! If there's nothing else, I should get back to my desk." "Wait." The word landed like a command, and to her shame, her feet obeyed. The conversation, Dexter's jaw worked as if he were choosing words carefully. That night he stopped, tried again, didn't realize how much you had to drink. "I shouldn't have, don't." Her voice cracked like glass. She forced it steady. "We don't need to talk about that." He stepped closer, then thought better of it. His hands slipped into his pockets. "But we do." Because what?" Deborah snapped. "Because now you're my boss? Because you suddenly feel guilty?" He flinched. She almost felt bad. Almost. "I recognized you the moment you walked in," he admitted. "And I can't pretend it didn't happen." Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "Pretend is all I've been doing for months." The ultrasound photo in her purse felt like it was burning through the fabric. Dexter's eyes narrowed, catching the tremor in her voice. "There's more, isn't there?" She froze. "I need to know," he pressed. "Tell me." "No." She shook her head violently. "This is my life, not yours. You don't get to walk in," and her throat closed. "You don't get to rewrite this." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Deborah, I'm not the man you think I am," she bit out. "You're exactly the man I think you are." Aftermath, tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Deborah turned on her heel and left before he could say more. In the hallway, her knees threatened to give way. But she kept walking, chin high, until she reached the sanctuary of her small cubicle. Alice appeared moments later, sliding into the chair beside her. "Spill. Why did the new boss look like?" He'd seen a ghost. Deborah forced a brittle smile. "Maybe he did." Alice frowned, then leaned closer. "Are you okay?" "No." The truth tumbled out before she could stop it. Alice studied her, sensing the cracks but not pushing further. "Then I've got your back, whatever this is." Dexter's reflection upstairs in his corner office. Dexter stared out at the city skyline. Reflection in the glass looked like a man in control, but inside he was anything but. Deborah Miller is the woman from that night. The one he hadn't been able to forget, no matter how hard he tried. He remembered her laughter, guarded, bright. He remembered how vulnerable she had seemed, how easily he should have stopped things before they began. Shame crawled up his throat, and now fate had twisted them together again. In the one place he couldn't ignore her, he whispered her name once, as if testing the weight of it in the empty room. Deborah. Deborah's resolve that night. Deborah lay awake listening to Diana's even breathing in the next room. The city outside murmured with sirens and the occasional bark of a dog. She turned on her side, hand resting against the small curve of her stomach. You're mine, she thought fiercely. Not his. Mine. But deep down, a shadow of fear whispered, secrets don't stay secret, and sooner or later he'll know. The office buzzed the next morning with the hum of printers, the tap of keyboards, and the low murmur of gossip about the new CEO. Deborah kept her head down, fixed on spreadsheets that blurred together into numbers she couldn't feel. Every tick of the clock tightened her chest. She could feel him even when she didn't look up. Dexter's presence was like a weight in the building, shifting the air. She hated that she was aware of him, hated that part of her remembered how his voice had curled around her name. When lunchtime came, Alice leaned against her cubicle wall, chewing gum like she was in high school again. Cafeteria run. You coming? Deborah shook her head. I packed something, Alice raised a brow. Trying to save money, Deborah forced a smile. Alice squinted, but before she could press further, her phone buzzed. She rolled her eyes. Oh, crisis. I'll grab you something sweet. She disappeared down the hall, heels clicking. Deborah exhaled and unwrapped. The sandwich Diana had made that morning whole, grain bread, turkey, lettuce, healthy, thoughtful. She'd barely taken 2 bites when the elevator chimed. The hairs on her neck stood up. Unexpected meeting. Dexter stepped out. Jacket draped over one arm, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, clipped. No, I want the figures by Friday. No excuses. As he ended the call, his gaze swept the room. Landed on her, Deborah snapped her lunch closed, shoving it back into her bag. Miss Miller. His tone was calm, but his eyes searched hers with something sharper. Can I see you for a moment? Every instinct screamed no. But she nodded, legs wooden as she followed him into the glass-walled conference room. He closed the door behind. Them? Shutting out the office noise? Why are you avoiding me? His words were blunt. She swallowed. I'm not. You are. He studied her, voice softer now. I need to know the truth. About that night. About everything. Her. Hands clenched around the strap of her bag. There's nothing else to say. But her voice betrayed her. It trembled. The slip that evening back at the apartment, Diana was waiting with grocery bags piled on the counter. She was humming as she unpacked milk, eggs, prenatal vitamins. Deborah froze. Diana. She snatched the bottle from the counter, shoving it into a drawer. You can't just... What? It's not like anyone here is judging you. Diana crossed her arms. Besides, you need them. That's not the point. Deborah pressed her palms to her eyes. People could... See? Diana softened. Deb, you can't hide forever. Sooner or later, don't say it. But fate had already been listening. Neither of them noticed the shadow. Outside the half-open apartment door, the tall figure who had followed Deborah home on instinct, compelled by questions he couldn't silence. Dexter, his jaw clenched as he stepped back into the stairwell. The word vitamins echoing in his skull. Dexter's doubt back in his car. Dexter gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles WHIT Ned. Pregnant, the word looped in his mind. Could it be coincidence? Maybe. But when he pictured Deborah's pale face, the way her hands sometimes lingered on her stomach when she thought no one was watching, his gut said otherwise. And if he was right, then the child was his. The thought hit like a blow and a spark all at once. Regret tangled with something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Longing. Deborah's fear that night. Deborah lay awake long after Diana had fallen asleep. She traced the ultrasound photo with her finger, the tiny blur, of life both fragile and fierce. You're mine, she whispered again. But the words felt less certain than before, because if Dexter knew, if he guessed her secret wouldn't be hers anymore. And then what? Would he take the child? Claim control? Or, worse, walk away again, leaving a hole that could never be filled? Tears stung her eyes as she pressed the photo against her chest. She wasn't ready for the storm that was coming, but the storm was already at her door. The office was buzzing with nervous energy. A quarterly review loomed and everyone moved at double speed. Deborah typed furiously at her desk, trying to ignore the dull ache behind her eyes. She hadn't eaten more than half a piece of toast. That morning, in her stomach, was a knot of nerves and nausea. Alice leaned over the divider. "You've been running on fumes all week. Eat something before you faint." "I'm fine," Deborah muttered, but her pale lips betrayed her. The collapsed by mid-afternoon, the heat of the office mixed with stress until the room blurred. Deborah reached for a stack of files, but her knees buckled. Papers scattered like snowflakes as she clutched the desk for balance. Deborah. Alice was at her side in seconds, catching her arm. A few coworkers rushed forward, murmuring concern. Someone called out, "She's going to faint, get her water." Deborah waved them off weakly, mortified. "I'm okay, really. Just stood up too fast." But her body disagreed. The world tilted again, and this time, strong hands caught her. Before she hit the floor, Dexter, he had appeared out of nowhere, his grip firm, steady. "Clear the way," he ordered, voice cutting through the murmurs. "Give her space." He half carried her into his office, ignoring the whispers that rippled behind them. Inside the office, Deborah sank into the leather chair, pressing a trembling hand to her temple. Dexter crouched in front of her, his eyes scanning her face. "You're not fine," he said flatly. "I just skipped lunch. Don't lie to me." His tone was sharper than she'd ever heard. "I've been watching you. The exhaustion, the nausea, the way you flinch when anyone asks how you are." Tightened, she looked away. He leaned closer, voice low. "Tell me what's going on, Deborah." Her lips parted, the truth rising like a tide she couldn't hold back. But then a knock at the door. Alice slipped in with a bottle of water. "Here, drink this." Ah. Her eyes darted to Dexter, then back to Deborah, silently urging her to stay. Strong. Deborah seized the interruption like a lifeline. She took the water, forcing a sip, then managed a weak smile. "See? I'm better already." Dexter didn't look convinced. The doctor's slip Alice insisted on walking. Deborah to the company clinic down the block after work. Reluctantly, Deborah agreed, knowing Diana would scold her if she didn't. The doctor, kind woman in her 50s, took her vitals and frowned. "Your blood pressure's low. Given your condition, you need to be more careful." Alice perked up. "Condition?" The doctor blinked, realizing too late. "A well pregnancy requires extra rest and nutrition."
Aunt!
Deborah's face went white. Alice's hand flew to her mouth. I'm sorry," the doctor stammered. "I assumed he knew." Deborah whispered, "He doesn't. Please, don't say anything." Alice recovered quickly, nodding, of course. "This stays here." But outside the clinic, she caught Deborah's arm. "You can't keep this a secret forever." Deborah's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I have to. I'll take everything. From my job, my control, maybe even my child." A shadow at the corner, what neither of them realized, was that someone else had overheard a junior executive leaving the pharmacy next door. Pausing when he saw Deborah exit the clinic, pale and shaken. He caught just enough words: pregnancy, secret. Doesn't note to ignite a spark of gossip that could burn through the office like wildfire. And far above, in his penthouse that night, Dexter replayed the image of Deborah fainting into his arms, her body too fragile, her eyes too guarded. He poured another glass of bourbon and whispered into the dark, "You're hiding something. I'm going to find out." By Monday morning, the office was humming with a different kind of energy. Not the usual stress before deadlines, but the electric crackle of gossip. Conversations hushed when Deborah walked by. A few colleagues exchanged glances, lips twitching. With curiosity they couldn't quite hide, she tried to ignore it, but whispers clung to her like static. "Did you hear? The Edmund girl fainted. They said she's, expecting." And the boss did. You see how he carried her into his office? Her cheeks burned as she forced herself to her desk. Alice hovered nearby, frowning. "The vultures are circling," she muttered. "Let them," Deborah whispered back, keeping her eyes fixed on her computer. "I just need to get through the day." A meeting with Dexter by mid-afternoon. An email popped up on her screen. "Meeting. My office. 3 p.m. Her stomach lurched. She read it 3 times before Alice nudged her. "You okay?" "No." Alice's voice softened. You knew this was coming. At 3 sharp, Deborah knocked on Dexter's office door. His voice called. Come in. He was at his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, but his eyes were sharp as steel. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She sat, spine rigid. He didn't waste time. People are talking. I can't control gossip. You can control the truth. His gaze pinned her. Are you pregnant? The room tilted. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Deborah. His voice was quieter now, but no less intense. I need to know. Her hands trembled in her lap. Why? So you can fire me? His jaw clenched. So I can take responsibility. Her breath caught, the slip she meant to deny it. She meant to lie again, to keep her secret safe. But when she met his eyes, earnest, searching, the words cracked. Inside her, it's true, she whispered. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against her chest. She braced for anger, judgment, dismissal. Instead, Dexter leaned back slowly, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for months. I knew it. Deborah's stomach twisted. Then what now? You swoop in, fix things with your money, make decisions for me? He shook his head. No, I don't want to take control from you. I want to share it with you, with him. His voice softened. Our child. The words struck her like thunder. She bolted to her feet. Don't say that. Don't you dare act like this was some planned fairy tale. That night wasn't. Her voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to happen. Dexter stood too, but kept his distance. You're right. Wasn't. And I'll regret how it happened for the rest of my life. But I can't regret him. Or you. Her eyes stung. She turned away, clutching her purse like a shield. I can't do this. She fled the office before he could stop her, whispers swirling like smoke in the hallway. Gossip spreads by the end of the week. The rumors had grown legs. Someone claimed to know the father. Another insisted the boss was involved. Deborah could feel the weight of eyes on her back, measuring, judging. At home, Diana noticed her sister's silence at dinner. You can't keep this up, Deb. It's eating you alive. Deborah's fork clinked against her plate. If he really cared, he wouldn't let me drown in this. Diana's voice was steady. Well, maybe he's waiting for you to let him swim beside you. Dexter's resolve that night. Dexter sat in his office long after everyone else had gone. The city glittered outside his window, but his mind was elsewhere, a woman too proud to ask for help, a child he had never dreamed he'd have. He whispered into the quiet, I won't let you carry this alone, Deborah. Not anymore. And for the first time, he began to plan a strategy for the company, but for a family he wasn't sure he deserved. The knock came just after sunset. Deborah was folding laundry in the living room while Diana clattered pans in the kitchen. The sound startled her. It was firm, insistent, the kind of knock that belonged to someone who expected to be let in. She froze. Diana peeked from the doorway. Expecting someone? No, not a knock. Harder this time. Diana shrugged and opened the door before Deborah could stop her. Dexter Hayes stood in the hallway. Tall, composed, his presence filling the small space before he even stepped inside. He held no briefcase, no shield of professionalism, just himself, raw and uninvited. Diana's eyes widened. You're the boss, Deborah muttered. Rising slowly, Dexter's gaze flicked between the sisters before settling on Deborah. We need to talk. Attention. Diana crossed her arms, protective. Maybe you should leave. Dexter shook his head. Not until I've said what I came to say. Diana, it's fine. Deborah whispered, though her voice trembled. Her sister hesitated, then retreated to the kitchen, banging pans loudly enough to remind them she was still listening. Deborah faced him, arms folded. You had no right to come here. You won't listen at the office. You run from me every time I try. Maybe that should tell you something. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It tells me you're scared, and so am I. Deborah's eyes filled, anger warring with exhaustion. You don't get to be scared. You're not the one carrying a child. You're not the one whose life flipped upside down because of a night that shouldn't have happened. Dexter's voice cracked. Don't you think I know that? I've replayed that night 1,000 times, wishing I'd stopped, wishing I'd seen how vulnerable you were. I can't undo it, Deborah. But I can try to make things right. She turned away, hugging herself. You can't just throw money at this and call it right. I'm not offering money, he said firmly. I'm offering myself. Whatever you'll allow me to be for the baby for you. Diana steps in from the kitchen doorway. Diana's voice cut through the silence. Do you mean that? Dexter turned, surprised. Yes. Diana's expression softened, though her arms stayed crossed. Because my sister doesn't need pity. She doesn't need saving. She needs someone who won't walk away when things get messy.
Dexter met her gaze.
Then that's exactly who I'll be. Deborah spun around, eyes blazing. Stop making promises you can't keep. Do you know what people are saying about me? About us? They think I'm nothing more than. Her voice cracked. A mistake. Dexter's eyes burned with intensity. Then let them talk. So I don't see a mistake when I look at you. I see the woman who's carrying my child. The woman I can't stop thinking about. Her breath hitched. For a moment, the room felt too small for the truths hanging between them. The departure Deborah finally shook her head, voice low. I can't trust you yet. Not with this. Not with me. Dexter's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He nodded once, slowly. Then I'll wait, however long it takes. He turned toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. His voice softened, almost a whisper. Just know you're not alone, Deborah. Not anymore. The door closed behind him, leaving silence in his wake. Diana crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her sister. Deborah clutched her tightly, torn between fear and a dangerous, budding hope. The days that followed felt different. Deborah tried to keep her walls intact, but cracks appeared where she least expected them. Quiet gestures on Tuesday morning. A plain brown bag sat on her desk when she arrived. No note. Inside were fresh fruit, a thermos of ginger tea, and a small container of crackers. Alice leaned over, eyebrows raised. Secret admirer? Deborah rolled her eyes, but her stomach tightened. She didn't have to guess. She pushed the bag aside, muttering, It doesn't matter. But by mid-morning, when nausea struck, she sipped the tea. Warmth spread through her chest, soothing, steadying. She hated herself for whispering, Thank you. Under her breath, Diana's confession that evening, Diana waved an envelope in. The air rents covered for the next 2 months. Deborah's brows knit. How? An anonymous donation through the community fund at school. Deborah snatched the envelope, scanning it. The handwriting on the form was neat, precise. Too precise, she glared. It was him, wasn't it? Diana hesitated, then sighed. Yes. And before you explode, listen. He asked me to accept it only if it wouldn't make you feel trapped. I agreed because you need the help, Deb. We need the help. Deborah dropped onto the couch, overwhelmed. He's trying to buy his way in. No, Diana said softly. Sitting beside her, he's trying to show he's not walking away. A lunch encounter later that week, Dexter passed her in the cafeteria line. He didn't speak, just slid a tray onto the counter, quietly paying for her meal before she could protest. When she started to object, he leaned closer and murmured, Just eat, Deborah. His voice wasn't commanding. Not this time. It was almost pleading. She sat at a far table, Alice at her side. But when she took the first bite of roasted chicken and realized how hungry she'd been, she nearly wept. The wall crumbles one night. Deborah stood by the window of their apartment, watching the city lights flicker. Diana patted in, yawning. You're thinking too loud. Deborah smiled faintly. Keeps showing up. In ways I can't ignore. Diana slipped an arm around her shoulders. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Deborah shook her head, tears brimming. I want to believe him. But if I let him in and he leaves, she broke off, clutching her belly. It won't just break me this time. It'll break us. Dexter's promise, meanwhile, in his penthouse, Dexter sat at his desk, a stack of contracts untouched. On the corner was a tiny photo Alice had slipped him grainy, black and white, an ultrasound, traced the outline with. His thumb and whispered into the quiet, I don't care how long it takes, Deborah. I'll prove to you I'm here to stay. For the first time in years, His ambition wasn't about profit margins or market shares. It was about something much smaller, yet infinitely greater: a child's heartbeat and the woman who carried it. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Deborah's small office, striping the floor in gold and shadow. She tried to lose herself in spreadsheets, but her mind refused to stay still. Every gesture Dexter had made over the past 2 weeks, pressed against her carefully built walls: meals, rent, quiet glances that carried more weight than words. She told herself it was strategy, manipulation. Yet her heart whispered another possibility: sincerity. The invitation that afternoon, a soft knock, startled her. When the door opened, Dexter stood there, not the imperious CEO, but a man uncertain of his welcome. "May I?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside, closing the door gently. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he drew in a breath. "Deborah, I don't want to hover in shadows. If you'll let me, I want to be part of this." From the beginning, her throat tightened. "Part of what, exactly?" He met her gaze steadily. "The pregnancy, the child, your life." She laughed, sharp and nervous. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," he admitted. "But that doesn't make it less necessary." The offer. Dexter took a step closer, his voice low. "When is your next appointment?" Deborah blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to be there, to hear the heartbeat, to see what you see." Pulse thundered. "That's not your right." "Maybe not," he said softly, "but it's my responsibility." For a long moment, the room was heavy with silence. Deborah turned away, staring at the worn blinds as if they held the answer. "You don't know what you're asking," she whispered. "Letting you in. It means opening doors I've kept locked for months." Dexter's voice broke with quiet intensity. "Then let me stand on the other side until you're ready. Just don't shut me out completely." Diana's counsel that evening, Diana found Deborah sitting on the couch, ultrasound photo in hand. "He wants to come to the appointment," Deborah said flatly. "And you're terrified," Diana guessed. "Yes." Her sister sat beside her, brushing hair from Deborah's face. "But maybe you're not terrified because he'll hurt you. Maybe you're terrified because he won't." The truth of it made Deborah's chest ache. The appointment a week later, Deborah sat in the clinic. Waiting room, purse clutched tight. When the door opened, Dexter entered quietly, scanning until he found her. "You came," he said, almost like a prayer. She managed a shaky smile. "Don't make me regret it." Inside the exam room, the doctor guided the ultrasound wand gently. The screen flickered with grainy light, and then a steady, rapid thump filled the room. The heartbeat. Deborah's eyes filled. Dexter's hand gripped the armrest, knuckles white. For a moment, the hardened CEO was gone, replaced by a man undone by sound. "That's ours," he whispered, voice breaking. Deborah turned to him, and for the first time, she didn't see arrogance or pity in his eyes. She saw awe. She saw truth, and something inside her shifted, just slightly, toward hope. By Monday morning, the whispers had sharpened into knives. Deborah felt them the second she stepped off the elevator. Sideways glances. Murmurs that died when she passed. Coworkers pretending to shuffle papers as if nothing was wrong. She didn't need to guess why. Someone had seen, someone had followed. And now the entire office buzzed with a single story. The new CEO had been spotted escorting his assistant into a medical clinic. The storm at work. Elise rushed to her desk, whispering urgently. "Deb, it's everywhere. People are saying you're pregnant and that it's his." Deborah's stomach lurched. "What?" "I don't know who started it, but it's spreading like wildfire. Half the board probably knows by now." Deborah's pulse roared in her ears. She grabbed her bag, fighting the urge to flee. "If this blows up, I'll lose everything." Across the office, Dexter's door opened. His gaze swept the floor, and when his eyes found hers, the room seemed to freeze. He gestured. "My office. Now." Behind closed doors, Deborah entered, heart hammering. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what they're saying about me?" Dexter's expression was grim, but steady. "I know, and I don't care what they say about me. I won't let them drag you through the mud. Her voice cracked. It's already happening. They'll think I slept my way into this job. She broke off, tears threatening. Dexter moved closer, his voice fierce. Let them talk. I'll set the record straight. No, she snapped. If you make this public, it'll only get worse. Gossip will never stop. Deborah, he said, softer now. You and our child are not a scandal. You're my family, and I won't hide you. Her chest tightened. Don't call us that. Not yet. The board meeting that afternoon, Dexter strode into a meeting with the executive board. Whispers swirled as he entered, but he silenced them with one. Command! Enough! He stood tall, shoulders squared. Yes, the rumors are true. I have a personal relationship with Miss Deborah Miller. She's carrying my child. And before anyone makes the mistake of questioning her integrity, understand this. She earned her position. She deserves your respect, and she will have mine. Gasps rippled through the room. Some directors exchanged wary looks. Others murmured approval. But none dared challenge him outright. Deborah's Shockless relayed the news to Deborah. Minutes later, he told them. All of them. Just like that. Deborah sank into her chair, hands trembling. God. Deb, Alice said gently, he didn't throw you under the bus. He stood in front of it. The walk home that evening, Dexter found her waiting outside the building, arms folded tight. She glared at him. You had no right. At every. Right? He countered, eyes steady. 'Cause if anyone's going to take the heat, it'll be me, not you. Her anger wavered, crumbling under the weight of his words. You don't understand. You've tied my name to yours. Forever. He stepped closer, voice low, raw. That's exactly what I want. She looked away, tears threatening again. I'm not ready for forever. Dexter's jaw tightened, but his tone softened. Then I'll wait until you are. That night, lying awake in her small apartment, Deborah pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, What are we supposed to do now? And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was asking herself, or the tiny life growing inside her. The invitation came on a Thursday evening, delivered not by email or memo, but by Dexter himself. He appeared at Deborah's desk after hours, his presence drawing curious glances from the few lingering employees. My mother wants to meet you, he said simply. Deborah nearly dropped the file in her hands. Your mother? She's back from a business trip? She knows about us, about the baby, and she asked to see you. Her pulse spiked. Dexter, no, I can't. Not like this. You can, he said softly, because you're stronger than you think. The dinner invitations Saturday evening found Deborah in her small apartment, fussing over borrowed clothes. Diana hovered with the kind of energy only a protective sister could muster. You look beautiful, Diana insisted, adjusting Deborah's blazer. And if his mother doesn't see that, then it's her problem. Deborah sighed. This isn't about clothes. It's about being judged before I even open my mouth. Then show her she's wrong. Diana kissed her cheek. You've survived worse than a fancy dinner. First impressions, Dexter drove them to his mother's estate, a sweeping brick mansion that looked like it belonged in a magazine.
Deborah's.
Hands fidgeted in her lap the entire ride. Inside, Mrs. Hayes awaited in the grand dining room. She was elegant, poised, her silver hair perfectly pinned. Her eyes swept over Deborah and lingered on her belly. So she said, her tone cool, This is the woman carrying my grandchild. Deborah swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Hayes motioned to the table. Sit, let's talk. The interrogation dinner began with polite small talk, but soon the questions turned sharp. What are your intentions with my son? Mrs. Hayes asked. Deborah blinked. Intentions? You must know how this looks. Young woman, pregnant, suddenly connected to a wealthy CEO. People will assume things. Dexter interjected, Mother. No, let her answer, Mrs. Hayes. Cut in, Deborah steadied her voice. I don't want your son's money. I don't want his power. I want to raise my child with dignity. That's all. Mrs. Hayes studied her, lips pursed. And if Dexter weren't in the picture? Deborah's chest tightened. Then I'd do it alone. I've been doing it alone. And I'd keep doing it if I had to. The room fell silent. A shift slowly, Mrs. Hayes set down her wine glass. The first time, her eyes softened. You remind me of myself, years ago. Stubborn, fierce, determined to protect what mattered most. Dexter's shoulders eased, tension melting from his frame. Mrs. Hayes turned to her son. You've chosen a strong woman. Don't let her go. After dinners, they left the mansion. Deborah exhaled shakily. Dot, I thought she hated me. Dexter glanced at her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. She respects you. That matters more. The back seat, Diana leaned forward, grinning. I told you, you're tougher than you think. Deborah stared out the window, hand resting on her belly. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, maybe this could work. Maybe we really could be a family. Winter crept in with a chill that cut through the city. Deborah had grown heavier, her steps slower, her breath shorter. She still worked part-time from home, but even Diana noticed the strain. You need to rest, Diana urged one morning, as she adjusted pillows on the couch. I will, Deborah murmured, rubbing her belly. Just a few more weeks.
The baby had other plans.
The first pains began late one evening. Deborah woke with a sharp ache that stole her breath. She brushed it off as normal discomfort, but within an hour the pains came faster, sharper, Diana. Frantic grabbed her coat. We're calling Dexter? No, Deborah gasped. Don't. Another contraction doubled her over. Fine, call him. The race to the hospital, Dexter arrived within minutes. Still in his suit, tie loosened, panic flashing across his usually controlled face. He scooped Deborah into his arms as if she weighed nothing. You should have told me sooner, he growled, fear sharpening his tone. She clung to him, half laughing, half crying. I wasn't exactly in the mood for small talk. In the car, Diana held her sister's hand in the back seat, while Dexter drove like a man possessed. Weaving through traffic with one hand tight on the wheel, the other pounding the horn. Delivering at the hospital, chaos blurred into bright lights, nurses rushing, monitors beeping. Deborah was wheeled into a room, Dexter and Diana trailing close. Hours stretched into a painful eternity. Deborah screamed, cursed, wept. At one point she pushed Dexter's hand away, sobbing, I can't do this. But he gripped her fingers. Again, voice breaking. Yes, you can. You're the strongest woman I know, and I'm right here. Finally, with one last cry. The room filled with the sharp wail of new life. A baby boy. The first moment Deborah collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming as the nurse laid the tiny bundle against her chest. The baby's cries softened, his fist curling instinctively around her finger. Dexter stood frozen, eyes wet, staring at the impossible miracle before him. Do you want to hold him? Deborah whispered. His hand shook as he took the child. Baby blinked up at him, features small but impossibly familiar. Dexter's throat closed. He's perfect. Deborah smiled weakly. He's ours. The fear lingers, but as the doctor spoke quietly with the nurses, Dexter caught fragments. Blood loss. Watch her closely. Rest is critical. His heart clenched. For the first time, the empire he'd built, the power he wielded it, all meant nothing compared to the fragile woman lying in that bed. He leaned down, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. Don't you dare leave me, he whispered fiercely. Her eyelids fluttered. I'm not going anywhere. A new beginning hours later, when the chaos settled, Dexter sat by the bed, baby in his arms, Deborah asleep beside him. He stared at the two of them, wonder and terror twisting together in his chest. He whispered to his son, I don't know what I'm doing, but I swear I'll spend every day learning how to be the father you deserve. The baby yawned, nestling closer. Dexter looked at Deborah and for the first time in his life, knew exactly where home was. The first weeks after the baby's arrival were a blur of sleepless nights and fragile joy. Deborah spent her days rocking her son, humming lullabies she hadn't sung since childhood. She lived for the tiny sighs, the grip of his small fingers, the rhythm of his breathing against her chest. Dexter tried. He truly did. He brought home groceries, hired a night nurse, and rushed home earlier than usual, at least for a while. But the company was restless. Rumors about his distracted leadership spread. Investors demanded attention. And slowly, inevitably, he slipped back into the rhythm of late nights at the office. The distance one evening, Deborah sat in the dim glow of the nursery lamp, cradling her son while the clock ticked past midnight. The crib sat empty. The baby refused to sleep anywhere but her arms. She heard the front door open quietly. Dexter's footsteps crept down the hall. He appeared in the doorway, tie loose, exhaustion etched across his face. "You're still up," he said softly. "Someone." "Had to be," Deborah replied, sharper than she intended. He winced. "I'm trying, Deb. Trying." Her laugh was bitter. "You hold him for 5 minutes, then vanish into spreadsheets and board meetings? I'm drowning here." The argument Dexter stepped into the nursery, lowering his voice. "Can't. Just abandon the company. Everything we have, everything he will have, depends on me keeping it together." Deborah clutched the baby closer. "Our son doesn't care about stocks or profits. He needs his father. I need you too, Dexter." His jaw tightened. "Do you think this is easy for me? I've never been this. I don't know how to be. What you need." Her eyes burned, then learn. "Because right now it feels like it's just me and him." The baby whimpered at the tension, and Deborah turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. Diana's warning later that week, Diana cornered Dexter in the kitchen while Deborah napped on the couch. "You're going to lose her if you keep this up," Diana said flatly. Dexter bristled. "I'm doing everything I can, except the one thing that matters most. Be here. Not just in body, really. Be here." Her words hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Breaking point that Friday, Deborah snapped, after another day of silence from Dexter, she packed a small bag, strapped the baby into his carrier, and announced to Diana, "We're going to Mom's cottage for the weekend." When Dexter came home to an empty apartment, panic gripped him. He tore through the rooms, calling her name, only to find a note on the counter. "I need space. Don't follow." He sank into a chair, the weight of his absence crushing down. For the first time in years, the man who controlled everything realized he had no control at all. Alone at the cottage, Deborah found a fragile peace. The air was crisp, the nights quiet. She rocked her son by the fireplace, whispering, "Promises through tears. I'll keep you safe. Even if it means doing this alone." But even as she said it, her heart ached, because no matter how furious she couldn't silence the part of her that still wanted him there. The apartment felt like a tomb without them. Dexter wandered from room to room, his son's crib empty, Deborah's sweater still draped over the couch arm. He sat in the silence, surrounded by wealth, yet lonelier than he had ever been. For years, his life had been measured in profit margins and quarterly growth. But now, every victory tasted hollow without Deborah's smile, or the tiny cry of their newborn echoing through the halls. A conversation with his mother on Sunday. Mrs. Hayes arrived unannounced. She found her son slumped in the dining room, untouched takeout boxes scattered across the table. "She left," he admitted, voice rough. "I know," she said softly. "Deborah called me. She wanted me to know she and the baby were safe." Dexter closed his eyes. "I've failed them." Mrs. Hayes placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not yet. But you will if you don't change. Money can build a company, Dexter, but it can't build a family. That takes presence, sacrifice, love." He looked at her, guilt etched deep. "I don't know how." "You learn," she said firmly, like every parent does. "One choice at a time." The mirror that night, Dexter stood in front of the nursery crib, staring at the stuffed bear Deborah had bought during her second trimester. He remembered her laughter that day, her excitement, the glow in her eyes. He whispered, "What kind of father am I if I let this slip away?" The answer came like a strike of lightning, the kind of man his own father had been distant, absent, consumed by business until family became strangers. Dexter clenched his fists. "No, I won't be him." The journey at dawn. He drove to the cottage. He rehearsed a dozen speeches on the way, each collapsing under the weight of his regret. What could he say to undo the nights Deborah had cried alone while he buried himself in work? When he arrived, the cottage was quiet, smoke curling from the chimney. Through the window, he saw Deborah rocking their son, humming softly. The sight pierced him, beautiful, fragile, and painfully out of reach. The plea knocked once, twice. Deborah opened the door, surprise flashing across her tired face. "Dexter," she said cautiously. "I had to see you," he whispered. She shifted the baby in her arms. "I told you not to follow." "I know, but I can't let you walk away without fighting for us." Her eyes narrowed. "Fight? That's what you call it? You've been fighting for your company, not for me?" "Not for him." Dexter's voice cracked. "I was wrong. I thought providing meant being away, making money. But I see it now, what you needed was me, just me, and I wasn't there." Deborah's lips trembled, but she held her silence. He stepped closer, tears burning his eyes. "Please, don't give up on me yet. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that this family is my first priority." A flicker of hope. Deborah looked at him for a long, heavy moment. Finally, she sighed. "Words aren't enough anymore, Dexter. If you want to be in our lives, you have to show me, day after day, no excuses." Dexter nodded fiercely, "And that's exactly what I'll do." Behind them, their son stirred, letting out a tiny cry. Deborah instinctively soothed him, but this time, she didn't stop Dexter when he reached out his arms. For the first time, she let him hold their son, and for the first time, felt the fragile, terrifying weight of everything he stood to lose and everything he was determined to keep. Spring came early that year, washing the city in soft light and new beginnings. For Deborah, the days were still long, filled with late-night feedings and moments of doubt. But something had changed. Dexter had changed. He kept his word anew. Rhythm every morning, Dexter arrived at the cottage before dawn. He brewed coffee, changed diapers, and stumbled through lullabies in a voice too deep but strangely comforting. At first, Deborah watched warily, waiting for him to falter. But day after day, he showed up on time without excuses. When she teased him about missing board meetings, he only smiled. "The board will survive. My son won't stay this small forever." For the first time, she believed him. Small steps. Big changes. He learned how to warm bottles, how to burp the baby without panicking at every hiccup, how to soothe cries with nothing more than a steady heartbeat. One evening, Deborah found him asleep on the couch, their son nestled against his chest, tiny fist curled into his shirt.
Ow.
The sight made her throat tighten. The once untouchable CEO now looked human, vulnerable. Hers, when he stirred awake, catching her watching, he whispered, "Don't be afraid to lean on me. I want to carry this with you." A walk in the park. Weeks later, they ventured into the city as a family. The park was alive, with laughter, children running, couples strolling hand in hand. Deborah pushed the stroller while Dexter carried a picnic basket. People stared, some in curiosity, others in recognition. But Dexter didn't flinch. He wrapped an arm around Deborah's shoulders, as if daring the world to challenge what they were. She leaned into him, realizing she no longer cared what people thought. For once, she felt safe. The proposal that evening? As the baby slept peacefully, Dexter lit candles around the cottage porch. Deborah stepped outside, startled. "What's all this?" she asked. He smiled nervously, slipping a small velvet box. From his pocket, a promise, he said. Not just to you, but to him. That I'll be here through every sleepless night, every struggle, every joy. You once told me words weren't enough, so I've been showing you. Now let me seal it with one more step. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant, but unpretentious, just like her. "Deborah Miller," he whispered, voice shaking. "Will you marry me?" Her heart pounded. She thought of the lonely nights, the pain, the fear. But she also thought of the mornings he showed up, the way he held their son. The way he looked at her now, not as a mistake, but as his future. Tears filled her eyes as she breathed, full circle months later under a canopy of spring. Blossoms, they stood hand in hand with their baby between them. Friends and family gathered, not to gossip but to celebrate. Diana beamed proudly from the front row. Mrs. Hayes dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, asterisk as vows were exchanged. Dexter leaned close, whispering, "You were never alone, Deb. I just had to find my way to you." She smiled through tears. "Now that you have, don't you dare let go." He kissed her gently, their son gurgling in delight, the crowd erupting in applause. For the first time, Deborah felt it deep in her bones. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, loved, complete, and as Dexter held her hand tight, she knew this was their full circle, not an ending, but the beginning of everything.